дамы и господа, ректор Московской школы управления Сколково, модератор пленарного заседания Андрей Шаронов.
Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Rector of the Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo, moderator of the plenary session, Andrei Sharonov.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends. On behalf of the organizers of this forum, I'd like to welcome you to this final plenary session of the fourth Moscow Urban Forum. Our session is called actually choosing the right development targets and frameworks for the contemporary megacity. I will introduce the participants and panelists of this plenary session, and I will tell you how it will look like, and I will start. I would like to introduce Merit Snurin, Deputy Mayor of Moscow for Urban Development and Construction. He has been working second consecutive day here in a niche building, and I'm very happy about it. Alexei Muratov, partner of Strelka Design Bureau, leader of the Moscow Spatial Strategy, a tool for managing the future study. Alexei Novikov, President of Habitatum International. Grigory Revzin, partner at Strelka Design Bureau, professor at the Graduate School of Urban Studies of the Higher School of Economics. Alexander Vysokovsky, Dean of the Graduate School of the Urban Studies of the Higher School of Economics. And to our foreign panelists, Eva Castro, Director of the Landscape Urbanism Program from the Architecture Association from London, and Pablo Aliad, Head of Vanica Company, Dean of the Faculty of Architecture and Arts at the Universidad de Desarrollo, Chile. Okay, dear colleagues, before give the floor to the first panelist, because our goals are quite traditional, and as you choose the goal for the city development, this is how the city will look like in 3, 5, or even 50 years. So the quality of target you choose, now the clearer this target is to translate these targets and goals to the societies, the professional societies. It is very important because in this case we can speak the same language. In this context, we deal today at this panel with the leaders and participants of different studies which were conducted for this urban forum, and they deal with the financial, human, cultural aspects linked with the development of a modern city. That's why I would like to remind you that the whole urban forum is devoted to the drivers of city development, and now we will try to analyze different drivers and how important they are for Moscow, because most of the studies deal with Moscow, but some of the studies deal with the whole of Russia, and our foreign participants will tell us about their visions in general. And now I would like to go through the separate drivers. It will be infrastructure, social development, strategy, interaction of authorities and citizens with the use of T. This will be the questions of the environment and comfort, how these factors can be drivers of a city development. And afterwards, our panelists will present and announce the results of their studies and how the big city study models can be used through these drivers. I would like to give the floor to Grigory Revzin in my questions about infrastructure. How do you feel? Maybe it can be quite obvious for you. How do you think that the development of the city infrastructure can be a driver for the further development? What is specific in Moscow, a very popular topic about the transport interchanges and hubs, the topic of a new Moscow because it forces to create a significant infrastructure, the role of universities in the city. We already discussed this topic at many sessions, and we also consider the campuses as a core element for the city development, and there are a lot of beautiful examples in the world where the campuses are really good platforms which can identify the development model for the city. It is quite unexpected. I'm responsible for the infrastructure. It is absolutely obvious that it is very important for the city and everything what we are doing in Moscow in the area of transportation. And the crisis unfortunately stopped us a little bit, and we are developing the underground system significantly. And it is a real breakthrough. I won't tell you about obvious things. It is normally quite complicated to find finance for these large-scale projects, which can bring Moscow to a new high-tech level. I would like to tell you another driver of development, because there was a session devoted to the architecture. Another important driver for the city development is the quality of architecture in the city, and it is quite significant and important thing, because we already said that not only architecture is guilty, because we need to talk about the social spaces, but what we managed to do in the last 4 years, where Mr. Sabani is our mayor, we have significant tenders and contests, and we also would like to see the beautiful implementations of these projects. As for the new Moscow, it's a very interesting story, and it partially linked with a situation that is not real driver. It is normally extensive development of the large area, and in this case is a type of development which took place in the whole 20th century. And for the modern Moscow, it is a challenge, I know, to develop this large area. It is very complicated because we're in the very beginning of our journey. Well, I can't say that a lot of things have been done, but things that are being implemented are quite unexpected. And here, that is really unexpectedly good, because in the Kommunarka village, we identified that the average salary in Kommunarka is 10% higher than in Moscow. I think it's a beautiful result. Amazing result. Grigory, I would like to ask you one more question, because you're talking about the new Moscow, because at the first and second urban forums we heard such assessments that the new Moscow can steal resources from the development of the traditional areas in Moscow, because the usability and the effect of 1 ruble to invest in a new Moscow is in old Moscow is higher than into the new Moscow. Now your assessments changed about what I'm talking about, development the neighboring areas to Moscow, and it also may have a positive effect for the whole city. In order to develop the new Moscow, Moscow should get a reconstruction. I think it's kind of a jump to develop the new Moscow, because the new Moscow, it's not a city, it's a country where there's a number of cities, villages, forests, and so it's a country headed by Moscow. This is our main conclusions of our study. If I come over to the second question, because there is no sense to search for center of this city. You don't need to identify where are the outskirts. I think it's a country. For example, the capital can be located not only in the center but also somewhere outside. And in new Moscow are quite similar, and the Kommunarka village probably is the capital of this new Moscow at the moment, but it is located next to Moscow and not in the middle. When we talk about any mechanisms to develop the new area, it is normally a challenge and a mobilization, and these logics normally function for the Moscow development. And we are not talking about the return from every single invested ruble. And I'm not sure that the new Moscow gives us the same results as the old one. Probably the first 10 kilometers behind the motorway circle perhaps the similar indicators in the old Moscow, but the rest not. Alexei Muratov. Now, these factors like master planning, globalization, participation in different rankings, is it a driver for the city that started measuring itself against the global scale? I think it's a set of different questions. However, we can track a very interesting paradox in the current Moscow development of Moscow's space, because we all understand and know, and it was mentioned several times in this forum, that Moscow is developing absolutely right and will take over Beijing quite fast and will be ranked first even next year before the next urban forum. And we also know that the special development of Moscow, I think it's just a joke. If some people may not understand it by it is a joke. I'm expressing my hope because the Moscow is developing very positively and dynamically, and this development takes place in the space through federal programs, targeted investments, territorial schemes, site planning programs, and so on. And we use either short or middle-term documents or the so-called private documents because Moscow doesn't have any special development strategy. We don't have any documents for territorial development. So we have a very interesting question: how efficient is the planning? What are the limits for the planning? Probably this framework based on the short-term and private mechanism could be efficient, but I think this set of questions is something what we can discuss. As for the study, our aim was to show that the strategy of spatial development or integrated development strategy could be a very good tool to optimize resources and to attract new resources to the city development, but I will, and someone will tell you later about it. And this is the question I would like to ask Merit Husnulin a little bit later when we will conclude the results of the first part. Thank you, Alexei. And I would like to give the floor Alexander Vysokovsky, because the topic of human capital and healthcare education, the topic of elder people, could this aspect and this group of factors be a driver of Moscow development and of a city development? It is a factor and a driver of city development because many scientists and experts think that it is probably one of the main drivers for the city development, and probably it is the most important driver because human being, which used to be identified during the so-called Ford's economy, became the main driver of development, because I'm talking about a human being educated with a high initiative, with a higher level of welfare, the one who loves his own city and identifies himself with the home city. So we measured this human potential in this term. We only prepared one part of this study. We studied Russian cities and didn't touch Moscow. Second, no, if because with this study was made with Russian cities for the first time, because the human potential was measured not for a city but for regions or for the whole country, and it's an absolutely different measurement. Now we looked at the basic level of the potential. We looked at the basic indicators like the number of students, the health level, the remuneration level, and so on. If we compare Russian cities with Moscow, I think it is really worthless, because Moscow has a huge human potential in absolute figures, and Sergey, you just killed hope by two-thirds of the audience, because people started regretting that they attended our forum today. I will support them now, because you were too fast. Sobyanin was absolutely right that we have 30% of well-educated people. We have a lot of initiatives and projects. And there is considerable potential in the other Russian large cities. But what this study showed, there is at least fundamental picture of the world where Moscow and the other cities are equal. This is actually the feeling of common people towards their home cities. We ask this question very accurately. We ask people whether they really like to live in their hometown. We did it in small cities with a population of 200 or 300,000 people. Also, we asked people in Moscow and St. Pete. People used to give the same answer. Around 60 to 80% of the respondents said they like their home city. We are normally talking about those cities with a high human potential. Yes, they really like to live in the city when they are living, because the Moscow with its human potential, with all cultural, scientific and other values available here, people also say they like to live in this city. It means that we live in each own city, and we think we are not losers, we are satisfied with our cities, because we can implement our hopes within our cities. This is an absolutely other picture of the world. There is a picture of the world where everything depends on the scale and size, and now the picture when everything depends on the people's contact with the city. This is the main result of our study. Thank you, Alexander. And now I would like to give the floor Alexei Novikov, because now we will talk about the interaction of city societies with authorities. And I just wanted to tell you a small joke. When I was starting working at the mayor's office, when one of the old official said, when I saw a pager on his belt, this was a pager of our mayor. This is the tool to communicate with the society. It is not a joke. At that time, it was a solution which was in use, and how the current mayor's pager looks like. What kind of technology are you using now? Because Moscow is also among the IT leaders who manage to communicate with the citizens. Thank you very much. When we started studying the tools to get the people involved into the city's life, and we were expecting to see a lot of savings out of these electronic services, and we also understood that we can find the best practices in different cities of the world when the city becomes more comfortable. But it is a fantastic driver of growth, there are three essential moments. First, if you set up efficient online service, you need to work hard offline. It didn't happen in Moscow, something what the federal government has been fighting for a long time for. I remember Mikhail Dmitriev working for the Ministry of Economy, and his desk was full of different files and paper, and now in order to reply a very simple inquiry question from a citizen or to provide an electronic service, you need to unite the federal, the Moscow, and the municipal officials. You need to train the universal specialists. You need to update the legislation, and all this thing may function if you have this so-called political will, and if you really want to carry out this administrative reform. And some of the large cities of the world managed to do it, like Buenos Aires, Megacity, or Moscow, and even this turn to be efficiently implemented, and it is a very efficient driver for the growth. Second, electronic services give enormous potential because the Lomonosov University of Moscow used to run a workshop in districting. Why? In one of the scientists attended the same workshop and asked why we were actually studying the zoning in the city, and we said that we wanted to know everything about even small municipalities, and if you are not really connected to a certain territory, you can also provide this service even being somewhere in the airspace. And it is something what really change your spatial behavior. And third, 15 million inquiries through the electronic services. This is a huge amount of information, and this is a real big data, and we need to process them correctly. And we can also understand how the city lives, whether the city runs out of the administrative borders or not. As for the new Moscow, we found out that there is an agglomeration, a metropolitan area, for example, in Braunschweig in Germany, when 50 small cities are united in one agglomeration, and the city use electronic services to provide the needed public goods to the person where the person is located. Thank you, Alexei. And I would like to give the floor Mrs. Eva Castro. You are a landscape urban scientist.
Okay, let me ask you just straight. You are the landscape urbanist. How do you envisage these factors like the environment, the level of comfort of the environment as a driver of the city and urban development?
First of all, let me say that I'm sorry, but it was very difficult to understand what you were all saying, because the translation kind of takes away the emotional factor. So at some point, one doesn't know if it is positive or if it is negative.
Here is Moscow Urban Forum.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm in the wrong place.
To be on the
I'm
same
sorry.
page, yes.
No, I've got the feeling, and maybe Pablo can help me there, that there is in general a super positive sort of a feeling about Moscow, at least by all of you sitting in here. Everything said seems to be very positive. And I think an upbeat feeling is really good, but if you're not critical and very critical about your habitation and your environment, there is no way of producing any kind of valuable modification. So to me, that is a problem. And this I say it as an outsider and as an academic. I would have expected to hear lots of complaints from everyone so that I could really say, okay, so here there is something that we can do. It feels a bit like there is nothing to do. Moscow is just perfect.
That's why we have invited foreigners to be more objective.
Okay.
Thank you. Try to be.
I've been kept within the first ring of Moscow, which is indeed beautiful, besides the fact that nobody's living in there. So, let's say, I'm going to try to answer to your question in a way that I'm a very ignorant person about Moscow, but I think...
You can answer not about the Moscow in particular, just about the, any
Okay.
abstract city and the
Yeah,
role of the environment.
Okay, I have heard a lot about this new Moscow development. I cannot have a fully critical position about it because I think very often processes of urbanization are unfortunately more related to political desires and actions than to actual spatial territorial necessities. So I will stay away from that, but what I think it is important when dealing with a new territory, a territory that, as I understand, is very rich from its kind of material consistency, because it's got lakes, it's got greenery, it's not like a desert, is to have an approach by which you can develop a plan that integrates what is existing as an active matter. And what is existing as an active matter, also thinking about no wasting of resources and kind of potentializing the resources that already exist. So to this extent, I'm going to do a little bit of advertisement on landscape urbanism because that's what I know how to do. I think it will be very important to set up a strategy that, that integrates. So that integrates the spatial existing requirements with the spatial requirements by the brief, but from a point of view that, that we can understand green infrastructure and blue infrastructure to be associated. I quite like what the guy from the Strelka, I think, said about, sorry, the Russian names are very difficult for me.
For us too.
Thank you. Yeah. So I quite like what he said about the value of architecture, because very often architecture is kind of left on the side in kind of in the name of roads and avenues, and then we leave architecture out to whatever developer comes with enough kind of a capital investment and just pays his way off and does whatever horrible monster that, like Paula Vigano was saying yesterday, ends up being a parasite of the city.
We will ask the deputy mayor about this particular issue because it's not a very seldom situation in many cities.
I can imagine. But it's always a very difficult relationship when thinking about development, the money that the kind of private capital brings in, and the relationship of how controlling the capital, the private capital investment, so that it does not what they want 100%, but a mediation with what the inhabitants want. At the end of the day, the mayor and all politicians have been voted by us, so they should represent us. And this happens very rarely. And this is not a special critique to you. I don't really know that this is the case in Moscow. But to me, that is a very important issue to include in the development of any urban plan.
Do you have some personal impressions about some privileges of the Moscow environment, Moscow landscape, which could increase the attractiveness, the quality of life in the city?
Look, we have just done a project, we won a project for a park,
Sokolniki.
Thank you. In the northeast of Moscow. And one thing that we kind of understood through the process of doing that park is that Moscow actually has lots of green area. But to me, or to us at least, is important to understand the difference between ornamental green areas and performative green areas. I think at the moment, the green areas that exist in Moscow are a bit of a legacy or a heritage of other periods. So they tend to be ornamental. They are beautiful, but they don't perform. They
do not work, probably.
No, it's not that they don't work. You have to set what is the parameter. Does it work? Does it not work in terms of what? So I would say something that I notice is that people in Moscow, they don't go to a park to just relax, do a picnic and play football. Parks need to be programmed, they need to be activated, there needs to be small functions, and then people really make use of the parks. So this is something that doesn't happen too much. So that might be one reason why maybe they are not so utilized. I think another reason is the weather. So it means that they need to be activated during the winter with kind of a 24 hours activities, lighting, kind of a small sort of perhaps hubs that give infrastructure to the park. But another issue that is more important at a governmental level is that all these parks, they represent public expenditure. They don't need to if blue infrastructure is included within them. So by blue infrastructure, I mean systems of recycling the gray water and reutilizing the gray water to actually feed back into the park. Such gray water that is recycled can then also be reutilized to send back into the community, etc., etc. So the park doesn't need to be just beautiful and to be used. It can be part of the machinery that feeds back into the city.
Okay, it's very interesting remarks. Thank you. We'll come back to you. Сейчас я прошу.
And now I'm asking
Very much. Я прошу взять слово.
I'd like to give the floor Pablo Allardo. We don't have any specific topic for Mr. Allardo, but which driver of city development you would focus us based on your experience, based on the large city histories, first of all, of Chile?
Well, thank you very much, and I agree with Eva that we haven't heard that much criticism, but just by framing the forum on this idea about what are the drivers, I feel in the air that there's a concern on Moscovitz about, I mean, we have all the indicators, we have everything set up, and something is happening that we don't really get the great leap forward toward the greatest city you guys deserve to be or feel like you should have. And thinking about the drivers, I think the greatest indicator or driver now for any city will be quality of life. And that's not something easy to get through KPIs, like key performance indicators, because it's not quantitative rather than qualitative measures. And it's always hard to really measure that. And if we start thinking on how to measure quality of life, I mean, if it's about heritage, you have a great structure, you have a great city, you have all this history, all these parks, all this heritage, that it's amazing. So check, you're fine on that. If it's about the economy, even though the ups and downs of the nation's economy, size matters, this is a huge city, you are a great nation, so check, that's fine. I mean, you won't have finance problems to really move forward as a great city. If it's education or technology, you guys are still sending people up to space, you have great technology, your rockets don't fail like the Americans, so you guys are really doing great. But so what's missing is what is called the soft power. And what cities are looking after now is soft power. And you can see that the cities that are thriving now in terms of quality of life have managed to do so despite many difficulties. I mean, New York has moved from resilience after September 11, and they're taking over the streets for pedestrians and bicycles. They are reclaiming infrastructure and creating parks on top of railway lines. They are kind of like retrofitting the city, and really it's becoming a vibrant city and safer city. Copenhagen has worse weather than you guys, and they ride bikes everywhere, and they are really like getting and moving forward towards that soft power. So what could be the driver for that? I think that you are addressing here, and you have a great opportunity in terms of some of the main problems you are facing. One is transportation, and the other one is how to activate the public realm. And I think they both collide as a great opportunity, because mobility and the space of mobility is going to be the greatest public space of the 21st century, particularly since now we don't have that many places or opportunities for sharing or being together. As you can see, where are the places now where you spend time with other people? Airport terminals, train stations, subway stations, all those spaces where you're still captive of that situation that is called passenger in transit. And that's a great opportunity for placemaking. Unfortunately, the ones who already got that opportunity are retailers who already coped and occupied that space. But I think that there's a great opportunity to domesticate those spaces for the public good through design. And public realm will be the place for that soft power, particularly in cities like Moscow. Why? Because transportation infrastructure decentralizes the public realm and brings it up to where people move, to where people live, to where people try to get through. And I think it's a great opportunity to really think about transportation infrastructure and public space as a gathering. In terms of how to manage that, how to activate, how to really, and following on what Eva said about the public spaces, the public space of the 21st century city is completely different to the traditional historical parks and streets. And I have 7 ideas that any city should consider, at least from my point of view, and this is something we can discuss later. The first one is that you have to scale it down, at least to the scale of the neighborhood, in order to phase it down, in order to activate it, in order to manage it. Big scale always tends to fade, and it's very hard to manage. The second one is to promote participation, but not through voting or committee, rather than involve citizens on the design and the implementation. And there's a lot of experience in tactical urbanism where you can see that now through new methodologies, the community participates in the design through testing and failure and retesting and rapid prototyping of public spaces. The third one is programming and activating the spaces. No more contemplative spaces. We have those already. We need places where we can program festivals, we can have markets, Wi-Fi on every public space, parties, and so on. On the fourth, retrofit and innovate, like the High Line in New York. Try to find spaces like the river here. I noticed that you are running a big project to recover the river as a big public space and not just a way through for cars and water, and I think that's a great idea, how to reclaim those spaces. The fifth is start thinking out of the box. And even though that will create a lot of controversy with the transportation engineers and the traffic authorities, start breaking rules, reduce car lines, create some congestion, have some trouble, because the sixth one is that you cannot plan limited to current day technological constraints. Technology is changing way fast. Cars in the next 5 years will navigate themselves and will find a way through the existing street network without opening or widening more streets. And the seventh one, that is, I think, the most challenging one, and you can really bring some great lessons for many other cities, is that we're going to need to start sharing the city. And it's something that is happening everywhere. It started with public bicycles, now it's moving to public cars, and now you can see that other cities like, for instance, Seoul, are promoting this idea of the shared city, that is not a place for everything individual, but there's many places, there's many opportunities for really sharing not only the car, not only the bicycle, but also some other activities that you have in the city. And that will really bring people together, that will really create place making, and that will really bring up the soft power you guys are looking for. Thank you.
Спасибо, Pablo.
Thank you, Pablo. It looks like a concept, a ready-made, a finished concept. So I have no more questions to you. I'd rather ask Marat. Well, Marat, you have just heard our experts and their opinions. They told you what factors of urban development and what elements of urban development, of the urban environment and urban communities could be the drivers of growth. For instance, if you belong to the urban development sector, and if you have a look at the situation as the head of such an industry, in your opinion, what's more important? Infrastructure development, roads, pipelines, wireless or wired connection, urban planning, developers who have their opinion on the urban development and who push you forward and who impose your decisions, their decisions and their opinions. Or there could be a human capital, public opinion, healthcare or education. Is it the cooperation of of people with our authorities? This is what Pablo mentioned. Or is it landscape? You mentioned Moscow River, which is a decoration of our city, and we often neglect this. But in fact, in the future, it could really predetermine the future development of the city and be a real driver in the further urban development of the city. It could promote transport development. What do you think? Is it possible to draw a hierarchy and to decide where to build and what to build, or on the contrary, not to do anything? What's your opinion about the drivers? Thank you, Andrei, for your question. I believe that the main driver of Moscow and of our country is people. Those who thought that these are developers, no, these are not developers, these are people. I try to explain why I said this. And by the way, these are not my words. 5 years ago, Nikolai New, who is the creator of Singapore Miracle, came to Russia after 10 to 20 years, and he was very critical about Moscow, about party politics. But when he returned in 20 years and had a look at Kazan, he said, "Your riches are not oil and gas, your riches lies in people. And you have the country where you have average and high education." And by the way, it's noticeable now when we have decline in oil prices. And you see, Moscow has lots of highly educated people. Our main capital is our people. Please pay attention to a very simple thing. Friday evening, the end of the working week, but the room is full. We have the full room of people. Urban Forum has the worst time of the year. This is December, when there's lots of snow, temperature differential, temperature difference is very high, and we have only 8 hours of the daylight. Well, you know, it's better to stay indoors than outside. No, I'm not speaking about that, but still we have people from different countries, and here we have foreigners who have never seen snow. They came to Russia to see, they came to Moscow to see what's going on here. Therefore, driver is those people who are sitting here, those who attend this forum. This is the energy of those people who are involved in the work of this forum. They are the driver. Because people are interested, they want to change their city, they want to change conditions of their life. There are lots of young people, lots of professionals. In my opinion, the forum will give a huge impetus, and this will be the driver for further development, for the change of mindset. When the previous session was over, and when I left the room, all of a sudden I saw the owner, one of the largest development companies. I was struck. I asked him, "Wow, what are you doing here?" And he said that I came here to attend the session about the transportation hub. He has 2 million square meters of real estate. He's so rich, but he didn't send his assistants here. He came personally himself to listen to the session. And he is a driver. And the people who understand the strategy of development are the drivers who want to be part of this strategy, who want to have their say in this work. Now you mentioned the oil prices, and when I was reading the news today, I had a look at Top Yandex. For instance, according to the news, we will have the capital drainage several billion rubles. Well, this is sad news, but if we create conditions that will prevent the flee of capital from Moscow, from Russia, then those assets that we have will help us to develop the economy of the country and of Moscow in the first place, because Moscow is the most attractive city. This is also the hidden potential, and I believe our main driver, our key driver, is our citizens. Now we have public hearings. We inform people through our service which is called Active Citizen. Over 10,000 people discussed the construction in Pushkinskaya Poima. People are not indifferent. But have you seen anything in their comments which changed your opinion? Or you were just satisfied to see that 10,000 people attended this public hearing and you stuck to your opinion? What was the quality of those ideas? Well, you see, there were different approaches. There were quite good, pragmatic, specific proposals. Or there were either approval or misapproval. People said, I will like or we dislike. Most of people said that, yes, we like this project and we want it to be implemented. Therefore, when we have citizens involved in the city management, it's good. It's good to see people who are not indifferent, and this is our driver. What is our advantage? I talked a lot with the colleagues from other megacities, and I can tell you, I can assure you that we're second to none in terms of the time which is taken for decision-making. We make decisions so fast for urban development on the area of 130 million square meters. And we do not just make decisions, we implement those decisions, we launch investment processes, we generate tax revenues, we construct roads, infrastructure. This is our serious driver. In a nutshell, the main driver is our people, and all the rest is application. If we have a professional team, then the business will be interested and people will be interested. And obviously all the projects that we have in mind will be implemented regardless difficulties, be that economical or political difficulties. But this is not bad, because in crisis people become more dynamic, they become stronger, and during the crisis strong people become stronger. Moscow is a strong city and it won't be impacted by the economic hardship. Thank you, Marat. And the second part of our session will be dedicated to the following discussion. So I told you that here we have the researchers, several researchers who especially prepared for our urban forum. And it's very good that we can cover here different cities. I would like to ask my colleagues to make their comments and to tell about their results, the results of studying various models of development. So very briefly, please provide your insights, provide your comments. Alexei Muratov was dealing with master planning, lives in New Moscow, Novikov for electronic government, and Revzin conducted the comparative analysis of regions. So now I'd like to give the floor to Alexei Muratov. Thank you, Andrei. So we were studying master planning. And at the Moscow Urban Forum 2 years ago, it was said, when the heads of the city were present here, it was said that the city needs a strategy. It needs a more comprehensive vision. So we had a look at the Moscow experience, its regional experience, and international experience, and then we formulated quite specific proposals. And those proposals were about the strategy, its content, and the tools and the roles in the city governance. So we deviated to humanistic component. But you have no objections against this concept, right? No, I personally do not have any objections. You are very uncertain when you gave this answer. Well, you see, there are some objective prerequisites. Well, you know that people become more active and they are now investors. I mean that they pay taxes, and the taxes makes quite a big share in the budget. Therefore, our people and their money is the driver of development. It's clear. But speaking about all these people, one of the slogans of our study was to go from passivity to a more passionate approach. The special development strategy and strategic master plan can be the new type of the public space. And this is the public space which is the tool for forming the broad consensus about the city future. If we have a look at all the mechanisms which help us to get people involved, to have people involved in work on Moscow, we can say that there are three categories of people: active citizens, those people who are not indifferent, and silent majority. So now we see that activists and those people who are not indifferent are mostly involved in our work, and they are working in their communities. They mostly complain, and they file complaints, and do not provide many proposals, mostly complaints. As for the city future, here we have discussions online and offline. We raise the awareness of people. We share ideas at different stages of the strategy development. And this could be quite a good tool to have silent majority involved. Alexei, I think Mr. Novikov will tell us more about that, but could you come back to the topic of master planning? And I have my personal question to you. What do you think? How is the master planning, which is more related to spatial solutions, is related to the city strategy, which is more related to economic strategy? Well, speaking about the strategy in general, you know, this is the way of achieving some objectives given limited resources. So on the one hand, we should optimize our resources, and on the other hand, we should attract new resources. Those cities who develop strategies usually have problems with, they experience problems with land deficiency, let it be that Vancouver or Singapore. They didn't have enough land for development. Therefore, they had the infill strategy. and they had to operate on a very small area. There could be some other strategies, which was the result of which were the results of energy deficiency, or sometimes it's necessary to focus all the resources on some narrow areas or narrow directions. Spatial strategy is related to the space development, but at the same time, it has social and economical aspects. All these aspects could be integrated into the spatial strategies. The modern strategies of spatial development are not projects. These are mostly tools. And here we speak about mechanisms and resource optimization rather than maps or schemes. This morning, we show Chicago strategic plan. There was only one map, a transportation scheme, but a big chapter is about the city development, about spatial development, and about tax development. And there were also the principles of investments and fundraising. So this is a full-fledged strategy. This strategy is better for public. And the last question, since we do not have much time, what does it mean for Moscow? Your conclusions, I mean. What does it mean for Moscow? For Moscow, it means the following. Well, you see, we have another slogan for Moscow, that Moscow needs not only roads, but also directions. For Moscow, it means that we need to have principles of development. And these principles of development should be discussed and determined. So your conclusion is that the city lacks certainty in the development. Yes, I mean the city as a social body. Okay, thank you. Grigory Revzin, could you please tell us about your studies about New Moscow? How long are we going to study the New Moscow, which is not densely populated? Well, we are just at the very beginning. Could you speak louder? So, you know, the study will be conducted next year, and this year we just made first steps. It's so boring to retell you everything, but the major essence is that this was the goal setting. Moscow is or New Moscow is quite an interesting thing. It was like a gift which Moscow received. Is it a Trojan horse? No, I hope it's not a Trojan horse. But New Moscow is just in the vicinity of Moscow. We know what developers want in New Moscow. They want to find a suitable format of the post-Soviet housing format. As you know, we have the post-Soviet elite housing, and now we need to find new forms of housing. Those who will define those forms of new houses will be the richest and the most successful. So New Moscow is the platform for looking for new options, for new experiments. And I understand the wishes of developers. We need to understand what our authorities want from New Moscow. They want to have a well-balanced city. And this is a reincarnation of the 1960s idea, when there is the balance of social infrastructure, residential area, and offices or industrial area. So on the one hand, we need to have enough jobs. On the other hand, we need to bring administrative powers to the New Moscow, so it should not be in the center of Moscow. Do you remember that in the 1960s we had Sputnik cities, which were producing missiles or where the major industries were located. So now Kommunarka is going to be the place for our administration. Then there will be also healthcare, the ministries of healthcare, and so on and so forth. And this will help us to ensure the balance of houses and workplaces.
I think it's quite an unexpected model because it's a non-market one. It was born by the industrial civilization, and it also has clear risks. We already described them. But the most surprising thing for me was because this model may function, and I was giving you an example that Common Narco Village is developing brilliantly because the salaries are even higher than in Moscow. If you create a satellite city, and the management function didn't come to Common Narco Village, but it still lives very good. We also don't know about the professional dreams about the new Moscow. Because what is a new city for Russia in terms of architecture, for example, or industry, where unfortunately we don't really haven't really articulated this dream. We already carried out a tender for the development of a new mosque, but everyone would like to catch the customers' wish, but we don't have any manifestial vision. What kind of city are we gonna see in a new Moscow? And we also don't have any clear understanding about the citizens. Certainly, the people may have a certain dream about new Moscow. Some people say that they are living here and it's our main asset. Probably people think that new Moscow could be an absolutely different city, but this dream is not really linked with a new Moscow. This is just a certain plan for this research. The first part was devoted to the authorities and the developers. The second one was devoted to the professional view and the sociologists. But next year we will try to connect it, and we don't really understand what we'll get as a cancellation out of it. So we just listen to the announcement for the next urban forum, and you will tell us next year what a new Moscow means and what the citizens of new Moscow think about themselves. Thank you very much. Grigory. Alexei Novikov. When we talk about the e-government, and we know a lot of Soviet jokes, that we discuss something with the population and decide, and now we have an opportunity, physical opportunity, to get advice or discuss something with the whole population. I would like to find out more about the content of the opinions and the types of the opinions you get, and how the authorities should deal with this opinion assessments. We analyzed 30 large agglomerations in the world, including Moscow. We were comparing how the electronic service system functions in each of these 30 agglomerations. So we categorized everything in two scales. One scale was for the interactivity. On the other side, we have a pure information communication. Because when we asked and got the answer, the second scale was devoted to the civil and the professional issues. And most of the services we researched were in the category in the one-way interaction and the civil and professional issues. Civil issues, we had less information about the professional interaction. Paris, London, New York, this is quite typical for them. And in the first part, the Cairo, Moscow, Buenos Aires, Mexico City, and Seoul are somewhere in the middle or in the upper part, but not at the top. What are the main problems? According to your question, first of all, this is the coordination. If we have a vertical coordination in order to reply for and require, it is possible, and it works somehow. So it is possible to connect officials from different authorities, different levels within one jurisdiction, and we can let them cooperate with each other. But if you talk about the intersectional cooperation or intermunicipal cooperation, when we talk about more municipalities, and when the city covers all of them, it is quite impossible, very difficult to cooperate all these officials among them. Well, we listened to one of the radio stations during the forum. We got a lot of phone calls from the Moscow region, and they were criticism because Moscow is a Moscow region. It is quite difficult to cooperate with the Moscow region. Second issue is something what Alexis started telling you, and this is actually offline and online services. First, trust. Some people don't really trust the electronic services, and we also polled the audience whether the audience is ready to accept the electronic certificate of your, for example, property ownership, and 60% said they were not ready. And another thing is the accounting requirements, especially the statutory accounting requirements. Sometimes you need to file a paper to the tax authority, and the business people recommended us to take into account this issue that the tax authority requires paper documents. And another question is actually the respect for those people who are not able to use electronic service because they are illiterate or are not able to use electronic service. So we have to keep this balance. And many managers we interviewed in Russia and abroad, they using the following KPI, the 100% transition to the electronic services, or they may assess the electronic services into how many people use them. But this is an infrastructure, and the accessibility of this infrastructure is more important for the citizens than the fact of use, because it's a strategic infrastructure. If you have a city garden or park, and if you don't use this garden, it doesn't mean that you don't want to have such a garden or park in your city. And sometimes I think that the city authorities have to think about it, and we also need to support these electronic services through crowdsourcing when you use the people's websites. If you look at the traffic jams on the Yandex.ru, it saved millions or billions of dollars for the Moscow government because it was created by a private company. And finally, data. As I already said, 50 million inquiries in Moscow. It is, I think, a fantastic resource in Moscow, and nobody has been using them yet, and nobody considers it a gold mine. And the last thing I would like to tell you, we need a system of economic assessment, how these electronic services influence the city economy. I said that it may save billions of dollars for us, it may save 10 or 100 billion dollars for us, but the root estimations show that the savings could be in dozens millions of dollars. So we need to consider it not only as a tool of better comfort, but as an important economic tool for the city infrastructure. Alexei, if we split the functions of these electronic feedback systems, what are the trends in the world? Is it moving towards the services, or is it still information tool? I'm talking about that local governments may use them in order to inform the people. Besides these public services, the open data are very popular, because you can open any data, or you can open data which cannot be used, because the data should be well structured and presented in a way to be useful. So you need to provide access to the software developers in order they can use this data for their applications. So the authorities should work with the software developers and the people. I think it will be quite a significant effect, so it will be in addition to the public services, which can also use this extraterritorial potential, and the people can use the city space really free. And the second part of this question is in terms of informational importance. The global trend is a way for governments to persuade people in their intentions and get the so-called social agreement, or it is just a channel to get the crowdsourcing information. Do the governments believe in it, or it's something, or just a must for them, which allows them to keep a certain social comfort or peace, or just a vision of a dialogue? Because the social comfort is very important and the governments really want to achieve it, but the strategic goal is something what we normally call accompanying planning, because the city is changing the linked planning. There's an opportunity to react on people's inquiries, to create a system to react on these inquiries. This is the front line in developing the planning mechanism and in using data, as well as I'm also think you're absolutely right that this strategic direction is only in the very beginning. And the more we develop the electronic services, the more focus we put on it. Thank you, Alexander Vysokovsky. After Merit Husnul confessed that the people were more important than the constructors, but the constructors are also people. Andrei, your approach is interesting. I'm talking about the professional developers. I'm also meaning the developers are people. In this context, it's quite difficult to confess that the human capital is important and how valuable it is for every single city. You made a great study, got a lot of conclusions, and many of them were based on intuition, on your feelings, and I also was able to forecast some of this conclusion even before the study. What unexpected result did you get in terms of human capital, or in terms of structure of human capital, when you were researching different Russian cities? I already said that was quite unexpected for us that the human capital does not depend on the scale effect. We were researching the basic level of human capital in Russian cities and the tools the cities should use in order to attract new people and in order to develop this human capital. These tools are already known, but it was important for us to show in the study that they really work, because people normally say a lot, but there are few proofs with good data. What does really work in a Russian city? It is obvious that a high potential can be achieved by the diversification of industries, or those cities who set conditions for new enterprises and plants in the IT area or in the service area. The human capital goes up. I think there's a problem of a chicken and egg, because it is normally created in those cities which are already having this human capital. Certainly it is interdependent. We are not able to say what was first, egg or chicken, male chicken. We can also include into the protocol of our forum. It is important. It is also important to say that immigration and the work on the transit capacity of a city are very important. It also can increase the human capital because there are still a lot of administrative systems that the foreigners are not, or migrants not really good. We need to develop our own citizens, and everywhere where the good transportation system is being developed, where the good airports are constructed, where the railway system is on a higher level, the human capital goes up. I already said it many times within these 2 days, but I'd like to point out another thing. All these parameters which are already known to us, when I'm talking about the parameters of the basic human capital, they already worked in Moscow. Moscow already used them. Moscow has good airports, the best educational systems, best universities. And it proves the following thing, that Moscow doesn't really win for migrants, because there is a significant traffic of migrants to Moscow. I think the total result of medical growth, I'm talking through migration, 600,000 people a year, is more than in our other Russian cities, including St. Pete. Because the increase of the human capital for Moscow requires other, more fine mechanisms. It should be another stage linked with the other levels of human being. I will try to tell you what it is. First of all, there should be a significant migrant traffic of different level, because Moscow is in need not only of well-educated people but also of common workers. What does it mean? If we talk about the human potential of Moscow, it means the problem of new identity, and this problem is quite complicated, and we all know that how many people in Moscow are poorly linked with the city, and the problem where to spend free time, here in Moscow or somewhere else in Russia or abroad. I think it's quite obvious problem. I think it may touch just few percentage of Muscovites, because this choice is really complicated. For the main drivers it is complicated, and those who don't have this choice, they prefer to sit at home and be online. I think, for example, you may speak Russian really poor, but you have Internet Explorer and you can spend time on the internet, and Moscow provides you high-speed internet access. And the problem of the identity change, because people who come to Moscow, they come as a consumer and to earn money, and the time you spend here in Moscow, you live your life, and it also requires an identity, and I think it is a very important problem in order to increase the human potential. Another problem is there's a problem of so-called social capital. It's a problem of trust. We have quite a low level of the mutual trust and the trust to the authorities, and there is quite a low level of so-called latent trust. How can we turn this latent or hidden trust capital into the intensive cooperation with the city, with authorities? This is a large challenge for Moscow, because it should be also well programmed and implemented. Do you know any successful examples in the world, because you were talking about the micro groups, when these problems may be implemented in the local societies? I don't really know much about it. I didn't saw many of these examples. I saw in St. Paulo in Brazil, because the Brazil in São Paulo has a slightly better economy, and when the foreigners from Brazil and other countries get another level of interaction with the city and we're able to become members of society, I think it's very individual. Different cultures require different things. But one thing is clear: the increase of trust starts with the increase of trust towards the authorities. So the job the Moscow administration is doing in order to be open, in order to provide the service like open citizens, this is the process which also contributes to the better social capital and to the better trust among people. And the third thing, which I consider to be really important in terms of human potential, because the Muscovites are disoriented in terms of stereotypes of environment ideals, because Grigory said that he doesn't manage to identify what the Muscovites want, how they want to live, is due to the fact that the examples offered by the real Moscow environment are not enough, not good enough, because they don't really provide a good choice for the people in order to identify what they really want, because we can also say that we need a city of gardens or a block of beautiful architectural buildings, because these stereotypes are also a problem, and it's also a problem of self-identification. How the hierarchy of environment values is being built now. This is the area where we need to research seriously now, because we have different groups preferring different opportunities now. Thank you, Alexander. I would like to remind you that research for the previous urban forum was devoted to the self-identification of citizens, because the people wanted to identify themselves not only with the city but also with a district or even block where they were living, and they wanted to be proud of the monuments, of the economic potential, of the way of life, of local life, and it was quite important for people. We already ran out of time, and I just wanted to do two things. I wanted to conclude this session and give the floor to Marat Snowden in order to conclude the whole fourth Moscow Urban Forum. I would like to be short. I'm really happy that my colleagues, experts, provided significant products, and this are the products not only of this session, because we can see a diversity of drivers for the city development, and this picture is not flat, and a significant focus is given to the people's opinion, and is not only what we say, it is a targeted activity which is being rated. And I'm talking about not about only Moscow, when the government really wants to know what the people think about the city and the future, and how the government really wants to search for good, interesting solutions, and are also ready to report how these solutions are implemented. It is also important as the traditional drivers like the economic activity, the infrastructure, or even master planning or strategy development. Marat, the floor is yours. As for the conclusions of this forum, what I would like to focus on, we increased the number of people who attended the forum. We dealt with a significant number of topics. We had 4 plenary sessions and 29 other events within this forum, a significant exhibition. And this year we decided for the first time that every single citizen can attend this event free of charge in the evening after 6 p.m. and on Saturday and Sunday. The exhibition is open and the people can come and get familiar with everything we discussed at this forum. We used a lot of internet technologies, and when we talked to the mayors of other Russian cities, then they said that they needed to come in a such large delegation because everything and all the events were actually shown on the forum website. And we discussed not only the problems of Moscow or other large cities, we just discussed the problems of different cities, how a megapolis can interact with the country, what is the example in other countries, like how Moscow interacts with Russia, how Mumbai with India, how New York interacts with the United States of America. And I also heard one interesting expression, because we used to think that Moscow was attracting all the resources. I'm talking about human and financial resources, and there was a competition between the Russian cities and Moscow. And this forum, I articulated really clear that Moscow was not competing with Russian cities, but Moscow was competing with other big cities in the world, and we, as Moscow, give an opportunity to Russian cities to offer their services, to offer their products, to build up a cooperation among the cities. And when I listened to the study results, I really focused on it, and we really understood that we don't need to compete, we need to improve our links and look for the opportunities how we and a million cities can benefit out of it. Merit, I would like to interrupt you. Even the UN found a negative experience when Nigeria decided to direct money not to the capital development but to other cities, and the result was quite poor. The money was not enough to support the cities, and they lost the capital in terms of development for dozens of years. Besides discussing strategic issues, we discussed real topics. Today, we are disputing at the level of government whether we need a general or a master plan. Unfortunately, many people don't really understand the difference, and today it was clearly identified what a master plan means in Russia and what a general plan means in Russia, because the general plan is our construction, city construction and development code, and the current general plan slows down the development of cities, so we need to use the international experience at the federal level and use the best practice which we already used, the best practice we discussed here, because we need to understand what kind of master plans are already used in other cities. Now the cities are developed because the master plan contains information for our managerial decisions. We not only discussed it, but as Moscow, we have an intensive dialogue with the federal center because we need to change some things in a general plan. Some of the things should be simplified to be more clear. And who can understand what the general plan means today? Because I have been doing the administration as an official for the last 15 years, and I really tried to read the city development and construction code. I was reading it before falling asleep, and it didn't help me to understand. Yeah, I was able to read for 5 minutes, and I was falling asleep because I was not able to understand what was stipulated in this code. Merit, I think it's a very good way how to check the quality of legislation. This is my know-how. How can we develop our city? How can we accumulate our energy for the development of the cities if the people don't really understand what the city development and construction code is? Because this document is for professionals, and we need a document which should be clear for every single citizen, because everyone should understand what's going to happen with the transportation system in the city, how every single district can be developed, where the parks can be located, because the citizens are interested in it, and we are not able to explain it to them based on our city development and construction code. We also discussed today the topic of hubs and transport interchanges, and at the end of the session, when Evgeny S. was not able to participate, but he sent just his letter in his 3 wishes, and one of the wish, we need to change the Russian word, the acronym for transport interchange or hub, because the Russian acronym doesn't mean anything for people. But if we talk about something that means a strategy of city development, one of mayors said yesterday that a good thing cannot be called in 3 letters, H-U-B. It doesn't see it. So we will probably explain this topic differently, probably will invent another word in Russian for the transport interchange or hub. We will analyze the results of this forum, and we will make the electronic versions of all the forum results, because it should become a fundament for all who are interested in this issue. And the fact that we really have so many participants and delegates and experts from 45 countries of the world, we also have 13 mayors of cities in the world. For example, we got the mayor of Mumbai. This is a lady governing such a complicated megapolis, and she was intending to spend 4 days here, and she was listening very accurately to all the sessions when the PwC creates the ranking of megapolis. It also includes Mumbai, because Mumbai is an emerging big city, and everyone who came here, they all enriched their knowledge, and they left some of the knowledge here. This is our capital. I'd like to use an opportunity to thank everyone, those who attended this forum, those who worked at this forum, and also the organizers, because in order to run this forum, we had a whole year to prepare, and it was a great job done by a large team of professionals, and we will try to make the urban forum even more attractive next year. So I would like to thank everyone for participation. Thank you very much, and I really want everyone of us to live in comfortable cities. See you next forum.